Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Deborah Pickerton. Welcome to Morning Light.
In just a moment, our new Morning Light panel will get behind the headlines.
But first, let's talk about the weekend. Pretty busy.
What'd you do?
Well, a friend from high school, Nadine, we traveled down to
That's
to
a long
Philly.
time. High school. You kept a friend from high school. That's a big deal. They must like you.
I think so. There we are. We're eating at Sabrina's with the kids. Yeah.
Wow.
Wonderful place to grab some lunch. How about you? Your weekend was busy.
Well, I did. Rebecca and I did a couple of events this weekend. We celebrated Word FM's 30th anniversary in Fogelsville, and then the next night we celebrated with the Pennsylvania Nursing Foundation 40 years. So
oh my goodness.
Lots of anniversary celebrations this weekend. We had a lot of fun. We even got in the photo booth there.
Yeah, that is a beautiful picture.
Thank you.
Nice job. Well, here's a preview of what's coming up later in the show. Anxiety can be paralyzing, and a presidential election can raise your blood pressure, especially when 7 in 10 adults say they're worried about the future of the U.S. So how do you really deal with these feelings? Well, Jeff, you spoke with our Morning Light medical contributor, to get some answers, plus how praising God can help you overcome those fears. Our
medical contributor is a wise man. Well, it is Monday, November 4th, and it's finally here, the eve of an election watched with anxiety all over the world. Political, economic, even military strategy is on hold until America makes up its mind. But what did it cost? OpenSecrets.org tallied it all up, and the 2024 federal election spending will now top, get this, $15.9 billion.
That is a lot of money.
With a B.
Yes.
Bigger than the GDP of 30 countries around the world. But what was the moral and ethical price we paid for the campaign of 2024? Are we better off after this marathon campaign?
I'm not sure about that, but I just know how that money could be used to help so many people and make a difference, really.
I agree. When you think about the price per vote, they spent a lot of money to really get what in the end?
Right.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Well, for weeks, pollsters have been saying women may very well choose the next occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's right. But when a group of 13 women led by Susan B. Anthony voted in the 1872 presidential election, well, it got them arrested, tried, and convicted for casting an illegal vote. The fine, $100. It would be 40 years until the 19th Amendment enfranchised American women. Well, in 1920, 8 million women cast a ballot without fine or penalty.
That's good news.
That is. But in 2024, are pro-life and conservative-minded women no longer considered part of the women's vote?
I think it's an interesting question, and I probably think our panel is going to weigh in on this heavily.
I think so, too.
I don't think there's one women's voice out there. But remember those astronauts on the extended mission to space, that 8-day mission that turned into 8 months? We love giving you updates about these wonderful astronauts. Well, thanks to a 2000 Texas law, NASA astronauts headquartered there can vote. Butch Wilmore, the church elder, often quoting the Bible in his press conferences, said, "It is a very important role that we play as citizens, and NASA makes it very easy." But even with encrypted technology and record security, a new Pew study says 3 in 10 Americans just don't trust elections. So what would it take to convince them or us that the process, the elections, still work? We'll take these big and hard questions to the Morning Light panel this morning. Pastor Dave Biser, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. Cynthia Lyons, thank you. Always glad to have you here.
Morning.
And
thank you.
John Wetzel.
Hi, Jeff.
I wonder what you're going to say today.
Me too.
Everybody.
Yeah, hard to tell.
All right. The winner and the loser. Let's declare the winner and the loser of the election, not as the presidential candidate, but the general public. When we talk about spending and the amount of money spent, everywhere we walk in Pennsylvania, there's somebody with a clipboard who's getting paid to go door to door, often. There's the signs, there's the billboards, there's the text messages, there's the commercials, every single break. Almost $16 billion spent. So, Pastor, what has the quality of our moral and ethical framework? Is it gone up? Do we get an A for this election, or has it gone down?
I personally think we need to restructure the whole system. I mean, to me, this is not the direction I want to see us go as the United States. To see the big one, we lose that sense of volunteerism if we're going to pay everybody to go door to door. Yeah. Two, it is truly exhausting emotionally and ethically and morally to think that we're spending this kind of money in order to get somebody's vote. And I don't think I think we've deteriorated the system down to a level where we're just going to spend more, and that's going to be the answer.
And the spending is generally on not telling people what you're for, but who you're against.
Correct.
Cynthia, something interesting struck me that Pennsylvania has more, you went to law school, more lawyers on the ground than at any other time in presidential history on both sides. Is that a good sign?
No, it's terrible.
Why?
Well, it's terrible because we are at a point where we no longer, the eve of the election, say, oh, I hope my candidate wins. We are now at a point where we're saying, please, dear God, let it be over.
Right.
And that really says a lot. I mean, it's not only tearing friendships apart, it's tearing families apart. You know, we can no longer, the joke is you can't talk religion or politics with friends, and now you can't do it with families.
Yeah.
And it makes it really hard. You know what the fight is going to be in Pennsylvania with that many attorneys that are here.
So this is a leading question to someone who went to law school. What's the grade that we get here? I mean, as a country, as a culture, watching all the TikTok videos and the Instagram videos, are we better off?
No, I don't think so. I think you're right about restructuring where we are. I really don't think that we're better off. When we get to the point when we're sitting in a church and everybody's saying, please let it be over, not let our candidate win. I was saying earlier, I was speaking to a dear friend of mine earlier today, and she said, I still am confused. If I do this, this is what's going to happen. If I do this, this is what's going to happen.
Everyone's kind of playing strategist.
Yes, and I would never have said that we were going to have that much confusion right now.
John Wetzel, there was a story out this weekend that one of the district attorneys in Pennsylvania is getting the jails ready for people who commit crimes in the election. This feels really tense, and a tension that I'm not sure pastors are trying very hard. I watched a lot of kind of sermons online, and you see this. What's your sense of this moment here? Win, losing, better, worse for all of this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think if it was a TV show and you like sardonic TV, you'd enjoy it. I mean, you mentioned a district attorney who's literally run on reducing crime and not overusing incarceration.
Right.
Front page, we're going to lock, I have handcuffs ready. You know, I think I think, first of all, we are challenged to try to find out what the message is here. I think that's really kind of the value. You say what the value of this moment is, I think it's making things very clear to us. Yeah. And I think when you look at elected officials at a time when, again, it's like Nielsen ratings, right? What's popular? And we're getting more of what we globally demand, which is so dangerous. And so we got...
It's kind of like we are what we eat.
Yes, and so when you think about the focus on ourself, right, and how both candidates are just playing into this, what we should really be discerning is like, we're going to vote tomorrow. The world is still going to exist the day after tomorrow, and again, let's look back in history. Look back even to Christ's time, right? When the Jews at that time were looking for the Messiah. Their vision, and it's funny, when we look back, we go, how couldn't you recognize Jesus? The reality was they were looking for a political solution. Wow. They were looking for a victory over the Romans. Right. And they missed the fact because he was hiding among poor people, people who were suffering, helping others. He was hiding in humility. Right. So I don't see that anywhere. So again, let's focus on who we are as a people after tomorrow.
That's beautifully
or
expressed.
2 weeks out, whenever.
Yeah.
Women, I'm just going to ask this question to you.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
Yes.
Women, when we talk about the women's vote, you're generally talking, it seems like, about a particular type of woman who is progressive. And the sense the pollsters are making is progressive women are going to decide this election. What about conservative women? Where do they fit into this? Women that go to church every week, or women who have a pro-life view or are more conservative? Do you feel that they're right in how they're characterizing the women's vote?
No, I mean, I really think that as a conservative woman, I have just as much power as someone that might be a liberal woman. I think we also have to define, what does that look like? You know, what is middle of the road anymore? You know, there is no middle of the road anymore, I don't think. You know, you're either incredibly conservative or incredibly liberal. I mean, really, with the suffragist movement years ago, historically, they were not saying we're absolutely for abortion.
Right.
Many
of them were very pro-life.
They were very pro-life,
Yeah.
and they weren't just fighting for the right to vote.
Yeah.
They were fighting for economic freedom. They were fighting for a lot of different things.
So it's much
not
more
just,
complicated.
Sure, absolutely. But I think we all need to go out and vote tomorrow.
I want to spend a little bit of time, quick round the table here, about confidence in the election. A lot of people still say, I just don't know if I trust the election system. When we talk about the sovereignty of God and God using flawed systems, Pastor, does that include, kind of a rhetorical question, but does that include the brokenness of our election system? Did he factor in that there were people going to be doing bad things in Texas or Alaska or Hawaii? Can we still have an election and trust the outcome, even though there may have been some trouble around the edges? What's the balance there?
I've always understood the omniscience of God as a God who understands and knows everything outside of our understanding of time even. So when Jesus is on the cross dying for me, he knows he's going to die for somebody who's going to mess it up constantly, right? And so I believe that God understands that governments are placed into positions, and we trust that God has a hand in placing governments over us and in us. And if we work that process properly, and I still believe in the process, I truly do. I believe in our electoral process. I think it's one of the best globally that's around. And so I have to place my trust in that. And I have to trust also that no matter what happens, God's still sovereign. God's still going to move. God still has a hand in the process. And there are still godly men and women who are in that process.
At the judge of elections, or
Right.
Right.
Correct.
That's fascinating.
Right.
Your thoughts on this? So you've been on the law enforcement side, on the corrections side, and you have seen the worst of humanity. So when you see this, and people are saying they should be skeptical of elections and they need to get ready and lawyer up, how do you interpret this, balancing this with what you have just expressed a few seconds ago about not having anxiety and trusting in God?
Yeah, well, when you say, worst of society, or a bunch of that was in the politics that I did. Less of that was inside the prisons and the politics, quite frankly.
You just shocked a lot of people there
Well,
with what you just said. Yeah.
I mean, it's a reality. I mean, it's the political environment. But just on a real basis, I think we have to understand that in Pennsylvania, I will speak about Pennsylvania government.
Yeah.
For these conspiracy theories and I'm not saying people aren't trying to sneak things here and there and sneak in whatever, but the process is a local process through county government, through people you elected and your neighbors. You see them in the grocery store. So that's the first step, and that's a 67-way check and balance, right? So, I mean, listen, here's the reality. We need whoever loses to concede. And we need the people who support them to concede so we can get back to normal. That's what used to happen. It used to be assumed. It's not.
That's
so
the
if
final
any
word?
of these guys are going to be leading, concede when you lose, period.
They heard that, and we're going to make sure that message goes out. Okay. Thanks for the advice. Well, thanks to our panel for joining us today. Coming up next on Morning Light, are you anxious about the election? What about everyday trials like paying the mortgage? Our Morning Light panel contributor has tips to protect your mind and to keep your eyes on Christ. Good morning, York, known as the White Rose City. You're watching Morning Light on Lighthouse TV.
The election season seems to stir up a collective anxiety, whether it be from the relentless negative political ads, political texts, or 24-hour news cycles.
So how can we manage election anxiety, or really any fear, more effectively? I sat down with Morning Light medical contributor Dr. David White to find out. Dr. David White said there's a presumption that people are experiencing anxiety on some level.
My ears and my eyes are open for that, and I often will offer probing questions. People have not only become more anxious, but they've also become more skilled at hiding that. And so some probing questions are very helpful.
Dr. White says it's important to ask questions, just like you would in a regular conversation, like, how are you? Or what are your plans for tomorrow?
People really value being seen, and so it's not hard to get people to engage that, but very quickly you will see people, if you tap into a question about their family or about their work, about their plans for the summer, or what's been going on, usually you'll get a little crack as to, yeah, I just visited my mother in the hospital, or yeah, we're having to deal with some family thing.
Many people assume you don't want to hear about their problems, so conversations are kept to polite pleasantries. But Dr. White says as a physician, you can really find out how a patient is doing.
For me, it's a testament that people just want to be seen and known. And the scariest place to reveal to people is where you're feeling weak or exposed or vulnerable. And so it's not evident necessarily when somebody walks through the door, again, because people are very skilled at covering, but it doesn't take much of an inquiry to say, how are you? And mean what you are asking.
Everyone struggles with some kind of anxiety, but it's important not to have an attitude that ignorance is bliss. Dr. White says anxiety has its place.
It is real that people get cancer. People do die. There are wars that happen. People do commit crimes. So let's just acknowledge that that does happen, but that's not the end all be all. I'll often ask the question, hey, where does God fit into this equation for you? That's all I'll ask. Where does God fit into the equation? In all my years of asking that question, thousands of times, nobody has ever expressed resentment, hurt, offense that I ask the question. People have a ready answer, almost universally, and that answer might be, there is no God. He's nowhere in the equation. And that, of course, allows me to take the next step. Well, tell me about that. How did you come to that conclusion? Or people will say, oh yeah, I'm aware of God, and I'm really angry with him because he has allowed me to suffer in these ways. And I know he's aware of it, he's observed it, he's seen it. And other people say, that's my only hope. That is my only hope. And so I don't try to force or rush people to that conclusion. It's acknowledging that there is suffering and difficulty in the world, exploring what their perspective and understanding of eternity, of God, of purpose and value, and then begin to probe those questions. Because a lot of times you'll see people have refused God or denied God simply because they're angry or hurt by what they maybe perceive as God's absence or disregard or lack of goodness.
The good news, there is hope for people who struggle with anxiety.
I would say God is the answer. Our hope is in Christ. And while I would encourage people to cry out to that God, more often what's going to happen in real time is they're going to need to connect with people in a community. It has to be a shared experience. And so the hope, as God would have it, God created us to be in relationship with him. That relationship was fractured. He healed it through Christ.
Well, Dr. White says a lot of anxiety is relational, so healing needs to happen through relationships. This is especially important to remember during this election process.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, coming up next on Morning Light, do the endless news cycles have you feeling overwhelmed? Well, we will take a closer look at how praising God through song can help melt those fears away. And good morning, Bethlehem, where you can take a stroll through the historic Moravian district. Thank you for watching Morning Light. Gilbert Lennox is a renowned Bible teacher, photographer, and the retired pastor of Glen Abbey Church in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He's also the father of one half of the world's most well-known modern hymn-writing pair, Chris and Getty of Getty Music.
Well, Isaac Crockett, co-host of Stand to the Gap here on Lighthouse TV, caught up with Pastor Lennox at the 2024 Sing Conference in Nashville. Isaac asked him how music, specifically hymns, help us fight fear and anxiety in times of uncertainty, like elections. Here's what he said.
Well, there's an entire book of the Bible dedicated really to that. It's the book of Revelation, which often is the book that leaves people with a headache, depending on how it's taught. But the core of that is where John is in exile, where the world is chaotic. And it begins with this vision of Jesus as the Son of God. He's the ruler of the kings of the earth. It's what a fantastic idea. So presenting that and those great songs at the start of Revelation, when there's a door open to heaven, John's invited to look in, he sees a throne, and it's an occupied throne. So there is somebody on the throne. It's not chaotic, folks. Don't worry. At the immediate level, it seems as if there is nothing that's secure, nothing that's tied down and we're sure about. But that's okay, because this is just the prologue to the real story. This is just the beginning. So, but what we have are those great songs at the start of the book of Revelation. As soon as you get a vision of heaven, you've got the songs written for us. And I know we're going to get some of these at the conference. So I would encourage people to, in that sense, look up, look to God, look to that throne, and sing the songs that are going to reflect that. Not triumphalist songs as if Christians are going to overcome in any social way or any political way or any, we're going to change the moral climate of our nation. That's unlikely to happen, I think. I mean, it's not that we're to do nothing, but rather make sure that we're actually looking to the Lord and following Him in our way. Whatever is happening around us. I mean, put yourself back to when Daniel was bearing witness to God in a totally pagan society and at the highest levels of government. I mean, it must have been a scary thing for him. His life is on the line constantly, and yet his trust was in the living God, and he devoted himself in his private worship to God in his prayer, and he witnessed publicly. And he leaves the consequences of that with the Lord. Perhaps it is that, we can get a bit comfortable and we can be used to being the majority voice in a country. And when that shifts, understandably, we begin to get really concerned. What on earth are they teaching our kids in school, and where is it going? I think we need to be careful that we don't allow that to become the agenda that dominates our life and dominates our hearts. Because I'm the same as anybody else. I listen to the news and I'm going, what kind of a world are my grandkids coming up in? My parents did the same like me, and the grandparents did too. So there's nothing new in that. We're thankful for the measure of peace that we've enjoyed, but many people have not. It's one of the great things that the good hymns can do is to point us to the big story that makes sense of our little part in the story. I mean, I love it in Acts when the Lord Jesus is commissioning and he sends them out and he said, I'm with you to the end of the age. And so he's coming back. So we know that we are in the time between his ascension to be with the Father and the coming of the Spirit and the return of Christ. So we know where we are and we know what's next. Now, we don't know all the trouble and trial. The Lord has told us about it. So we've got indications, we've got signs, we can see where things are going. But this isn't the final story. So we need to learn to commit it to the one who is the Lord of the story. That's what I would say. And the hymns can play such a big role in that.
Strong and important words from Pastor Lennox for those of us who claim to be followers of Jesus. As Christians, we are first citizens of another kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. That knowledge should keep us in perfect peace in seasons of political change and uncertainty.
Well, Keith and Kristen Getty will be back in the United States at the end of the month for their Irish Christmas tour. They play at a theater in Philadelphia on December 11th. And if you're planning ahead, the 2025 Sing Conference will be held from September 1st through September 3rd in Nashville. And for more information on the Getty Tour and to experience their music, visit gettymusic.com. Stay with us. We are back right after the break. Welcome back. Good morning, Apollo, home to the Jackson House and also Jeff Coleman's home. I wonder if we can find his home there. Thank you for watching Morning Light on Lighthouse TV. And coming up tomorrow on Morning Light, tomorrow is Election Day. We will take you on a tour of the history of elections and a closer look at the journey of a ballot. The polls are open tomorrow from 7 until 8, so be sure to get out and vote. And that's a look at what's coming up tomorrow on Morning Light. Now, Jeff, your closing thoughts.
Deborah, I could see my house from that shot. Well, every now and then a headline tells the whole story. Last week, the Wall Street Journal did it in just 8 words. Here's what they said. America is having a panic attack over the election. We think of America in presidential eras sometimes. Washington and that great founding generation, then Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, and FDR, of course, in World War II. And then we leap ahead to JFK and the race to the moon, or President Reagan in the Cold War, where my political memory begins. But America doesn't rise or fall because we get the right person in the White House. Think about that. It never has, and it never will. America survives as long as God decides there still is a purpose for what Reverend John Winthrop called the shining city upon a hill. There's a wonderful line in the Star Spangled Banner, down to the fourth stanza, that sums it all up. And this be our motto: in God is our trust. Not presidents, not political parties, trust in God. So yes, between now and when you go to the polls tomorrow, research and sit down and pray. Pray with your family, your children, your spouse, and then vote. Take a deep breath, close the curtain, vote, and then trust. Trust God, because He has the outcome of this election already determined. For Deborah and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Coleman. Thanks for watching. Check on your neighbors and be back with us tomorrow for Election Day for a special edition of Morning Light.